Hi, I'm Sunday Oliver, and I'm here to do a healing session about dealing with the emotional overload that goes along with realizing that a lot of things are broken and that things are not as you thought you were, or in other cases, that it's just enough. And I think enough is something that a lot of us are really coming to. And interestingly, no matter what side of the political divide we're on, it's enough of having people who don't have our interests at heart tell us how we should live, enough of having a ruling class that's small and a rest of us that is huge. Um, Emotional overload happens when you realize that your world is never going to be the same. And I think that's a lot of what's happening now. COVID-19 is part of that. And of course, the George Floyd and Black Lives Matter protest is another part of that. They both illustrate this whole notion of tiny, very comfortable elite and large, very uncomfortable rest of us. And I want to say that I am very familiar with emotional overload. And I'm telling you this not to impress you with my story, but because I have some skills that I can bring to the table here. I have been dealing with over the past 10 years or so an autoimmune illness a neurological illness that I was supposed to get worse and die from. I found other ways and means, so I am not getting worse, I'm getting lots better. I used to not be able to walk except for a very small way, and some days I couldn't walk at all, I had to crawl. I used to find talking so difficult that a 10-minute conversation, even if I was lying down and on the phone, would leave me sweaty and exhausted and completely done for the day. I used to be in so many different kinds of pain that I couldn't even really count them all. And I'll be honest with you, I truly felt that if my life went on that way, it was, time to check out because that was not a life. Another thing that was really hard was to lose my sense of who I was, because I think most of us think of who we are as kind of a combination of what we do and who other people told us that we are, and also, our own kernel of knowing who we are. What I'd like to do here is to expand that kernel of knowing who we are, and it's difficult to do that when you have the heavy emotional overload. So, if you're feeling overloaded emotionally, and I'm guessing if you click this video, you are, part of the deal here is that we have to start where we are. We have to admit it's broken, that our country's broken, that our view of what the world is broken, that it's time to stop pretending that everything is okay and we can just kind of manage if we brush up the top surface and just kind of shove all the nasty stuff down to the bottom. That is clearly not working right now. And I think that's a good thing. It's not a fun thing. I totally get that. It's really not a fun thing. But something I have learned about healing on a very physical level, by the way, also an emotional level and a mental level, is that if we don't look at what is, if we're not willing to accept it, even if we don't like it, then there's no possible way we're going to heal it because we're just trying to sort of push it away or push it down or pretend it isn't there or put a pretty face. Those things just to preserve that elephant in the room. Okay, there's something I'm going to be doing during these healing sessions. That's what this is for, is to not just talk with you, but to actually help change your state about this. Because we cannot act effectively if we're in emotional overload. And this I also know very deeply from my own experience. And you're probably feeling it right now. So here's something that you can take as poetic or an analogy, or you can actually try to put it to practical use, as I'm going to do as we get into the healing. And that is this, that emotions are so many traditions around the world, emotions are equated to water. And water is a cycle, right? We know about the water cycle and how, rain comes down and it goes onto the land and in the rivers and the streams and in our water supplies underground. And some of it flows out to the ocean, which is the starting point of all this anyway, because where did the rain come from? The ocean. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of hook us in to those parts of nature that I truly feel are meant to deal with our emotions. I truly feel that we were not meant to process our emotions through our bodies the way we generally do. And that when we process our emotions through the rest of nature, which we've forgotten that we're part of, and which I think is a huge part of the disconnect we feel in our culture today, in our society today, when we do that, it's not as if we don't feel the emotions. This is not about trying to get rid of emotions, which is completely impossible. You cannot get rid of anything. Einstein said it, matter cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be transformed. I say transmuted. For me, that works better. But it's really true. So if you're trying to make your emotions just go away now, you may have noticed that that's not working real well. And that's what we're going to address here. So it's kind of like recycling your emotions, rather than throwing them in the trash. So instead of going into the landfill and dirtying up the landscape, your emotions get recycled and changed into something new, because energy can't be created or destroyed. It can only be transmuted, right? So what I'd like you to do is come up with one emotion for this entire healing session and to just stick with that. I realize it's going to be uncomfortable to feel it, especially at first. And I want to encourage you to be willing to feel that discomfort, because it won't last, it will change. And if you don't feel that discomfort, then you're not going to be present with what the emotion is. And it's just going to be another round of you trying to shove it down, make it look pretty, all that kind of stuff, pretend it isn't there. Now, if you're so overwhelmed and confused that you really can't pick one emotion, that's cool. Confusion and overwhelm are also emotions. So pick one of those. You can pick overwhelm, you can pick confusion, whichever feels truest for you. And just allow yourself to feel that. A lot of times we're so busy fighting our feelings that we don't even allow ourselves to feel them. And that is really the key to healing them. Now, as we go through this healing, I'm going to be working with you, but I'm also going to be working with greater crowds of people, the protesters, the police, government officials. And I would like you to come along with me on that journey. We're going to start with you, and then you're going to be able to aid and assist in creating a new emotional theme, let's say, for other people. And that is true if you're listening to this as a recording, as it is if you're listening to it live, because time and space don't really mean anything to this kind of healing. And also, I'm kind of building in the time and space thing into this healing. It's the energy that I use. Some of it is within time and space, but some of it is also outside of time and space. That's actually something that's kind of natural for us to do, but a lot of people have kind of shut off their ability to do that. Being connected and understanding that the natural world is us, and that includes all human beings, and that we're all part of one thing. That is key to getting to the place and so I'm just going to start here with what I'm calling an emotion beast on you, and I'm going to go silent and do healing work. So here we go. Okay. So one thing I want to remind you of is that every time you exhale, you're part of the water cycle. And every time you inhale, you're part of the water cycle. Every time you exhale, time you inhale, plants are feeding you. These are stable, remember. And even if saying doesn't make a lot of sense to you, there is actually science to that, which you can look up if you need to, or if you don't already know it. That could help. Or you can just take this as a seed and plant it in yourself and see what comes of it. Okay, so now whatever that emotion was that you chose, stick with that. And we're going to apply that emotional calm down to the protesters so that they will be able to function well and to carry out their purpose and to be safe, because a lot of them are getting hurt, and also for any of them who have violent tendencies to be calmed down in that respect, or for those who have violent tendencies to just stay away from the difficult to do. But we can ask. We are all connected together. I think that's one of the things this moment is really bringing us into awareness of. That includes our planet, and that includes all of humanity. And if you're feeling heavy emotionally, maybe that's because you're realizing that for the first time. Many of us who are really sensitive to stuff like that have been feeling that for a while, but don't talk about it a lot in a lot of ways because people think we're crazy. Now everybody is feeling this, which I find to be a really interesting thing. So, without further ado, let's go into an emotional calm down for protesters. And here we go. Okay. And now I'd like to do an emotional calm down for the police. That is one of my neighbors running power machinery, if you can hear that. So I'm just incorporating that into the healing because it's just another frequency. It's interestingly possible to transmute any frequency into another frequency if you have the skill. And I'm not saying I have all of those skills, but I do have a few. So the whole issue of police and policing is a very emotional matter. again, whichever side of the political spectrum you're on. And of course, it's a mix. But as an institution, there is a structural issue with policing, which has tended to favor the powerful and disfavor the less powerful in terms of worldly power. So, this is what we're going to be looking at here, as well as individual emotions. It really feels to me as if a lot of the violence from the police is about feeling like their survival is being threatened. It's really just a certain kind of power that's being threatened, but they've identified with that power for so long that, for those of them who are not what I would call good cops, and there are good cops, and I've known some. For those of them that are not good cops, the rot in the institution kind of takes them over, and it makes them unstable. And I think we're seeing a lot of that instability now. So I'm going to do, again, a silent healing emotional calm down for police. And again, I encourage you to join me by feeling that feeling that you chose in the beginning of this, and by just tuning into what I'm doing. And I will take you along for a ride, and you will be contributing to this. In Qigong in China, they believe that the bigger the crowd doing Qigong, the more effective it is, because you have the amplification effect of lots of people doing the same thing at once. Now, in this case, we're not in the same time, but again, we are able to congregate through time and space. Technology is an interesting way that makes that happen. You know that we can do that now. Anytime you watch an old TV show on YouTube, you're kind of traveling through time and space, right? In a certain way. So we know that on certain levels, at least, it's kind of ordinary. So I'm going to go silent again and do an emotional calm down for police. And please join me. Here we go. Okay. And next, I'm going to do an emotional calm down for government officials. And after that, we'll have one more session before this healing um, program, I guess you could call it, closes. And again, what I'd like you to do is just to focus on the first emotion, the emotion that you picked at the beginning of this, and to, if you can do it, you can put your mind on government officials, or you can just kind of ride along on the current that I'm going to be setting up. But again, I think that a lot of what's going on has to do with people being very confused and disconnected from what really gives us sustenance. Because what really gives us sustenance is harmony, is recognizing that we are all singers in one big choir. That's what the universe means. It means one song. That we are all a part of something bigger. So each human being is not only part of every other human being, but we're a part of the soil. We're a part of the planets and the sun and the plants and everything that we know in material life. And we're also part of everybody's emotions and thoughts. So it is really possible to access these things. And you know that the thoughts of government officials and the emotions of government officials and the actions of government officials definitely affect you. So it's also true in reverse. The possibility is there. I think that we have just kind of forgotten that. And the same is true for our relationship with this planet. We tend to be very extractive, I guess I could say, and think of nature as a resource, which it certainly is, but it is also something that we have a relationship with and something that we are a valuable part of. And that's the bit we've forgotten. And that's the bit that I would like you and the protesters and the police and the government officials to remember and reactivate and regenerate. Because to me, if you don't have that part, then nothing's really going to change. It's just going to change on top and go back to the same old thing. So, again, I invite you along. I encourage you to bring that emotion, whichever it was that you decided on at the beginning of this session, and just be with it. You may have noticed that it's changed its nature to you now through these different sessions. That's totally fine. Just be with it in whatever state it is now. And if it hasn't changed too much for you, just I know that this work works, and it's just because I can allow through me certain things that are really, really helpful. And so you might want to check in and notice, where you are with that emotion and see what's changed. And you can take that to this healing of emotional calm down for government officials. Okay. So I'm going to end this session with a little healing on opening to and acting with harmony and power from our deepest truth. Because I truly believe that when we do that, things just start working out. You may have noticed that sometimes in your own life, when you're in the zone or in the groove or whatever name you have for it, those days when everything just kind of flows, things happen without your having to do much that you really want to have happen. I think the more in tune we are with that, which is very much a part of remembering our connections with all beings on this planet, non-human and human, when we remember that, the world changes. In my own case, when I was ill, and I remembered that, and through the fog of horrible brain fog and emotions and pain and all of that, it wasn't easy for me to do. But remembering that is what got me able to function again. I'd also like to say that my sense is that with government officials, in a way, they are kind of like the police in that they are kind of scared for their lives. They fear for their survival, as weird as that might seem to some of you, because they seem to be so powerful and have so much going for them, and have so much money and all of that. But our emotions really don't necessarily recognize external things. And again, the institution of government in my country, the US, was founded with very, very good intentions, and I think with lots of really forward and progressive notions. And it was also formed by wealthy white male landowners, and in, I think, 41 cases out of 53, wealthy white male slave owners. And in all cases, people who took land by killing people who were already living on that land. So, yes, there's some dirt in our governmental institutions because it was formed by people who lived in a certain place and a certain time and had certain biases and also had certain history. So it's the foundation that needs to change, and you don't change the foundation without changing the perspective of the people who are involved in that institution. Otherwise, they will cling to that institution the way it is desperately because they feel that their survival depends on it. That's their inner child speaking, you might say, their desperate inner child. So this final piece is for you. It's for the protesters, it's for the police, it's for the government officials. It's about opening to and acting with harmony and power from our deepest truth. Here we go. Okay, I hope you've gotten benefit from this, and I encourage you to come back to it and use it for whatever emotions are cropping up for you, or if this same one still seems to need some more layers of work, do that again. I'd also encourage you to pass this along to anybody who you feel might benefit from it, who is overwhelmed and overloaded and cannot function because of this sort of can of worms that has been overturned. I think that the more that we begin to get skillful in navigating through unknown territory, and the more that we understand that we are in unknown territory and we can't try to pretend or pull it back to something that we already know, the better off we will be. And I understand that on some levels, that's a very scary thing to consider and to think about. But I would also say that it's scarier not to do that. And I, again, know that from my own personal experience in my own physical, very physical life. I would not be sitting here today doing this. I would very likely be dead. I would certainly not be able to sit up, talk, and heal if I had not done that myself, if I had not learned to skillfully navigate territory that I have never been in before. So I wish you the best in doing that. If you I work, my website, want to energy healing recording a lot myself. It's about acting from compunction or duty or just like, got to do it kind of thing. It's about being inspired to act. And when we're inspired to act, as you may have noticed, things flow more comfortably and more effectively. So I recommend that one. I actually use it a lot myself. And that's something that you can have as another helper for you once you begin to get clear on what it is that is yours to do in this situation. I think we're all doing that, including me. This is some of me getting clearer on what it is that I'm going to do and just starting my first step. So I encourage you to go further with that if you'd like, or to just come back here and do more of this. I will be doing more of these sessions. I guess you could call them political energy healing. I'm not really sure what to call them. I just know that I am called to do this and that it's my contribution to what's going on in the world today. So be well, and I'll look forward to when we get together again.